You know his words will get you farther than the film will ever go. Give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you what's wrong with the show. He knows what's good, what's bad, what's really bad. His face is just a sign. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
Have you ever had the experience of driving really fast on the highway and then lifting your foot up and slamming down on the brakes? That is exactly what this movie is. No momentum carries over from one film to another in this series with regard to the pace. Which brings up once again another balance issue. The first film, as unfocused as it was at least exciting to some degree, even if it was just on a superficial action degree. This film is incredibly talky and boring. And in a rare instance for me, boring is actually a problem in this movie because Quentin Tarantino had 2 movies to divvy all this up, and he chose to make one the hare and the other the tortoise.
Looked dead, didn't I? Well, I wasn't. But it wasn't from lack of trying, I can tell you that. Actually, Bill's last bullet put me in a coma. A coma I was to lie in for 4 years. When I woke up, I went on what the movie advertisements refer to as a roaring rampage of revenge. I roared, and I rampaged, and I got bloody satisfaction. I've killed a hell of a lot of people to get to this point. But I have only one more. The last one. The one I'm driving to right now. The only one left. And when I arrive at my destination, I am gonna kill Bill.
That right there sums up the biggest problem that I have with these movies, and that is that Quentin Tarantino is showing us everything twice. Not like he usually does, where he'll repeat a scene but from a different angle or perspective. It's just the same stuff with occasionally a bit more detail added. This movie had the exact same opening as the first, so we had to watch that twice. Then we're told what happened in the last movie, so we had to get that twice. Now we're told that the bride will be successful in taking down everyone but Bill, but since we haven't seen her carve her way through the last 2 yet, we get to learn that information twice. So if you're just going to double up on every single moment and piece of information we get, why make this 2 movies at all? Just do it once and make it 1 movie. However, there is one part of this repetition that I think actually worked, and so we get to open this review with a bit of good news. Here is where we actually see Bill for the first time, and the conversation that takes place between he and the bride is somewhat mixed. It's okay in some parts and just completely off the subject in others. But this is one of the only times in the movie where knowing what is going to happen actually makes the scene more tense. We know that everyone at this rehearsal is going to die their asses off, but now we don't know exactly when or how that is going to happen. And as Bill lulls the bride into a false sense of security and even interacts with her new husband-to-be, Tarantino finally manages to pull off a scene of real tension. I think if he had spent time letting us know who the bride's friends and her fiancé actually are in the last movie, instead of, just Lucy Liu, this scene would have worked a lot better, but for what it is, it was very well done. So after a whopping 14-minute recap, we then come back to the present, if anything can even be called that in these movies as it jumps around so much, to Bill talking to Lucky number 3. And that's literal this time, since now the list is going in linear rather than sequential order for no reason. He breaks the news about the death of Lucy Liu and her army of 88.
You tell me she cut her way through 8 bodyguards before she got to Oren?
No, there wasn't really 88 of them. They just called themselves the Crazy 88.
How come?
I don't know. I guess they thought it sounded cool.
Oh. Okay. Jonah wasn't in a whale, he was in a big fish. Whatever. So anyway, Bill explains that she sliced through Oren and her army using the Hattori Hanzo sword. Apparently, Bud had a Hanzo sword himself, but pawned it as he no longer had any use for it, apparently. Bill tells him to prepare himself for the bride's inevitable attempt at revenge, and then takes his leave, so then Bud goes to work. He goes to work.
I don't know what car wash you worked before you came here that let you stroll in 20 minutes late, but it wasn't owned by me, and I own a fucking car wash.
Do you want me to leave?
No, I don't want you to leave. I want you to sit and wait.
Larry, there ain't nobody out there.
Larry, what's your plan? That you're not needed here?
My point is, I'm the bouncer, and there ain't nobody out there to bounce.
You're saying that the reason that you're not doing the job that I'm paying you to do is that you don't have a job to do?
No.
Is that what you're saying? What are you trying to convince me of exactly? That you're as useless as an asshole right here? Well, guess what, buddy? I think you just fucking convinced me. Let's go to the calendar. It's calendar time. Calendar time for Buddy. Okay, you working tomorrow?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You don't even know what fucking day you work.
Oh no. No, we're gonna watch this whole thing.
Here, you're not working tomorrow. You're working Wednesday. Here you are. There you go. Working Thursday?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Friday. There's your name.
If you say so.
There used to be your name. Okay? Saturday. There used to be your name. Monday, you go to... Here, how about that? Fucking with your cash is the only thing you kids seem to understand. Okay? I want you to go home till I call you. Till I call you. Before you leave, talk to Rocket. She's got a job for you to do. That fucking hat. That fucking hat. How many times have I told you? Don't wear that fucking hat here. How many?
Customers wear hats.
I'm not the boss of the customers. I'm the boss of you. And I'm telling you that I want you to keep that shit kicker hat at home.
For fuck's sake! See, this is why I say that even when compared to Tarantino's other films that I just didn't like, this is in a whole other class of bad. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of Jackie Brown in the world, but say what you will about that movie, at least it stayed on point. Even look at Pulp Fiction, a movie that I loved. The scene at the end where the two were talking about whether or not pigs and dogs were filthy animals. Sure, it may have been off the point to the movie, but it's giving us valuable clues and insights as to what these characters are like. This is just a guy being told to show up on time. Period. Good lord, they could have just told us that the boss was pissed off at him. And once again, this wouldn't have bothered me nearly as much if they hadn't spent 90% of the last movie fleshing out Lucy Liu's character. But this guy is number 3. Who cares what's going on with him at his work? Now, now that I think about it, you know what would have really helped this scene is making a 5-minute anime explaining to us all the factors that made him late. Bud then goes back to his home where the bride lies in wait. She very slowly sneaks up to his front door, but he gets the drop on her by shooting her with rock salt. Well, hey, we're getting closer to somebody actually shooting someone in this movie. Imagine that. All the talk about whether or not he still has the Hanzo sword handy, but what do you know? A gun works just as well. Bud then calls up Eye Patch Lady, who so far has just been background in these movies, and explains the situation. Eye Patch Girl apparently really wants that Hattori Hanzo sword, so a sale is made with the stipulation that the bride must suffer till her last breath. So the bride is then taken to a once occupied grave, and now comes to find that she will soon be occupying it herself. The next scene is something that I've never really seen before. This isn't a buried alive scene, it's a buried alive simulator. We usually don't get this kind of scene from the point of view of the person in the casket, at least in my experience, but good lord is this scene effective just in fear alone. Even if you don't care about the bride and her quest for revenge, and I really don't, this scene is tense as hell because you don't really have to care about someone to not want them to be buried alive, especially when we the audience are in the casket with them. I don't have an extensive fear of being buried alive, as I don't think that outcome is very likely, unless the Lion King fans find me, but I am extremely claustrophobic, and this scene just raises my blood pressure every time I watch it. Not enough to really save the movie, obviously, but very well done on its own. And so it seems that the bride has nothing to do now but lie there and wait for a slow death. Hey, remember that big, long discussion about what happened to Lucy Liu's character when she was a child? Sure amounted to a lot, didn't it? So the bride enters the house to find Bill, as well as her daughter, who, amazingly, it turns out, is still alive. And once again, it is only here that I realized that this actually could have been a 2-part review. If you thought the finale of a movie called Kill Bill was going to be exciting and riveting and involving someone, actually killing Bill, boy are you in for a shock. Apparently, we labored through this woman killing 2 meaningless cronies in the first movie, one of whom was far more developed than she was, and not killing anyone in the second movie so far, so that these 2 could wrap up the series by having a sit-down interview with one another. Riveting. It would be pointless for me to play you any of these conversations as they are so inane, so I'll just go ahead and sum them all up for you. If you step on a goldfish, you may as well have shot Uma Thurman in the face, and Superman's costume is Clark Kent. Goldfish and comic book heroes. Yeah, that's what we paid to hear about. We didn't pay to see her kill Bill or anything. Bring on the inane conversations. Now, the daughter character actually has no character at all. She's essentially just a generic Hollywood acting kid who was brought in to say kid lines at the protagonist. The girl really may as well have had a pull string on her back for how prearranged her dialogue is, and that's when she says anything at all. Hell, at one point we are forced to watch them watch a movie. Let me repeat that. We are forced to watch them watch a movie. As for Bill, basically all he does is shoot her with the truth serum and then talk questions at her as she becomes groggy. This, more than any other part of the movie, is the point where all the air is just let out of the room. Not only do we get zero useful information during this Q&A, but the movie actually forces us to watch one of her answers via flashback. We see the moment where she learns she was pregnant in a life-threatening situation, which, since we're listening to her tell this story, is deflated since we know that both she and her baby are going to be just fine. Ultimately, the end of this movie boils down to an inane, boring speech being made by Bill and the bride at one another while we all wait for the final battle. Good lord, is this fucking boring. But you know what might have actually made it okay? Having the Lucy Liu battle be the thing that we saw right before this, like I said. Because after sitting through a long, exhausting fight, we may have actually been in the mood for something light at this point. We certainly wouldn't have been looking forward to jumping into another big, long fight, and at the very least, their final conversation might have been received with just a bit more patience than we have right now. These scenes, as inane as they are, might even have been welcome after that big-ass battle. What a difference the structure makes. So finally, as these two sit down and talk at each other for the last minute, the bride finally makes her move. No, she doesn't go for the sword. She instead does a fancy move she learned by the asshole that trained her. It makes it so that the victim can only take a few steps before their heart explodes. Wow, so the whole thing's over in about 5 seconds, huh? Well, I can certainly understand why we needed to sit through 2 movies for that. But wait a minute, Bill has a few steps left? Well, hell, that's not so bad, dude. I mean, you could probably just get around in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or maybe get one of those cool motorized buggies that old people use. I mean, there's no real reason to... Ugh, what an idiot. The bride then takes her daughter along with the sword that turns out to be this world's most infrequently used prop, and the two apparently live happily ever after. These reviews have been a mixture of what I believe to be objective, as well as just plain personal issues with these films. The personal issues are completely my problem, it's just that discussing them became unavoidable when reviewing both movies in their entirety. I already don't like the kinds of films that these were inspired by, and these movies are a good example of why I don't like them. I can't stand indulgent entries into a great filmmaker's work, although I think every filmmaker of this stature is entitled to make at least one, and I'm not the biggest Lucy Liu fan in the world. Although I think that personal dislike may have caused some unnecessarily mean comments towards her. Sorry, Lucy. Feel free to stick your Lou bots on me. The objective problems I have with these films mainly lie in the structure, and for me, it just proves something that validates the importance of a good editor. A poorly structured movie can always equal a bad movie, no matter how good the material inherently is. There is definitely a good film series in here somewhere. It's just that for the first time in his career, Tarantino didn't put this together in an order that would have made that series shine. It was simply a mess. Watching Kill Bill is kind of like watching an overexcited kid play with his action figures off the top of his head. Oh, and then she gets a big sword! Oh my god, it's so cool! Oh look, now she's fighting a samurai master! Oh, awesome! And I say to Quentin Tarantino what I would say to that kid. Dude, honestly, I'm glad you're having fun, but I'm just gonna go do something else. The end.
Who are you talking to?
No one, baby. Lucy Liu is the only girl for Bender.
I love you.